Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my September 2025 reading wrap-up. If you're not already aware, I do weekly entertainment wrap-ups of everything I read, watch, and listen to, but today we're just talking about the books. I'm going to start with my nerdy hardcore stats and charts and then get into what I read. Also, I put chapter markers in all of my videos, so if you need to skip over anything or go back to anything, all of that is down below. As a reminder, at the end of the video, I'll also go over my bingo board from hell, my props for Read Queer all year, and how I did for Seasonathon Round 4. And while you're waiting for that to happen, you might as well make sure that you're subscribed, because sometimes YouTube likes to unsubscribe people just for fun. In September, I read 19 books for a total of 6,032 pages. That takes into account converting audiobook minutes to pages, so about 3,185 of those pages were actually about 110 hours of audio. The age breakdown for these books was 15 adult books and 4 YA books. I read 16 novels, 2 anthologies, and 1 graphic novel. This month, the biggest chunk of what I read was fantasy and contemporary, followed by nonfiction, mystery thriller, horror, and historical fiction. If you adjust by page count, you can tell that fantasy took up a considerable chunk of the page count. Almost all of these were from the library, but I did read one I bought directly from an author website. I read 9 audiobooks, 6 hardcovers, 3 paperbacks, and 1 ebook. The biggest chunk of my books were in the 300 to 399 page range, and the majority were published this decade, although I did read 5 other older books from completely different decades. When it comes to the authors' genders, there was a decent mix, although things sway heavily to one end of the spectrum when it comes to the genders of protagonists. In terms of setting, just under half were set in the US, but I also had books set in other worlds, the UK, Palestine, France, Iran, Argentina, and Austria. In terms of diversity of subject matter, the biggest chunk were queer and intersectional, as well as books that had to do with race and mental health, and one translated read that didn't have another diversity to it, so it didn't join into the intersectional realm of things. In terms of star ratings, this month I had 1 3-star read, 3 3.5-star reads, 10 4-star reads, 4 4.5-star reads, and 1 5-star read. Let's start with our lowest rated read and work our way up to the highest, shall we? My 3-star read this month was also the oldest read on this list, and that's Carmilla. This is kind of thought of as the original lesbian vampire novel. This one takes place in the middle of a forest in Austria where Laura, although we don't learn her name until like 61% of the way through the book, lives in this castle with her dad and a couple of servants she actually gives names to, and then everybody else she doesn't really care about. One day they're going for a walk and this carriage falls right in front of them, and this woman pops out and is like, oh well, this is not great because like I have a meeting to get to and my daughter seems to be unconscious. Can she just stay with you for like 3 months while I go to do this business and then I'll come back for her? Okay, bye. And then of course our unconscious girl is the titular character, Carmilla. Given what I've already told you about this book, I think you can probably guess how this goes, mostly because we've seen things like this so often since this book was published that this actually felt really predictable, even though I know that at the time that it was published it was probably really interesting and fresh and new. I enjoyed it, but I definitely had my problems with it. On my 3.5-star reads, the first one being A Single Man. This is a book that is written by the same guy that wrote the book that was the basis for Cabaret. In this book we are following a man who does happen to be single around for an entire day of his life. He lives in the Los Angeles area, teaches at one of the colleges, used to have a boyfriend named Jim who passed away some time ago, and he has all these other different people in his life that either know about that or don't know about that because this is from the 1960s. This is basically a case study of a day in the life of this character, and I will not wreck for you what happens in this day because it is quite an adventure. Next we have The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. This one is a very slow, cozy fantasy about this woman who used to work in a library, but the city is on fire, so she takes a bunch of the magic books and escapes with her sentient spider plant Kaz. And they take a library ship to this island that she used to live on when she was a child, and it turns out her parents still have a house there, so I guess she has a house there because her parents are no longer living. Her and Kaz try to set up this house as kind of a jam shop so that they can support themselves, and eventually she's like, well, I wonder if there's any spells in any of these books that could actually help us in this endeavor. Which is a little bit iffy because she's not supposed to be doing magic. This is one of those books where people are like, why is this so slow? Why is nothing happening? But it is definitely about the atmosphere. And it's not like there aren't high stakes things that happen in this, but it also feels really slow at the same time, to a point where you just have to be in the mood for something like this to actually enjoy it. There's also some delightful side characters, one of which I definitely had to make a cross stitch of, so obviously I enjoyed my time with it. Next we have Our Share of Night. This one is from Argentina and it takes place between the 1960s and I believe maybe the early 1990s might be the latest we get. This one kind of jumps around in the timeline a little bit, but it starts out with this guy named Juan, who we know is this very big deal in this blood cult. He's not the leader of the cult or anything like that, but he's the medium, so he's kind of the person that the cult needs in order to actually do their culty business. And to be in this position, he has to be close to death basically all of his life. He was actually born with a heart condition, which keeps him pretty sick. And the rituals they do take a lot out of him. It turns out this cult is going to want to use his son to continue out the rituals, especially after he is gone, and he doesn't want that to happen, so he's actually trying really hard to make it seem like his son doesn't have the same powers as him. In addition to that, when we meet him, we find out that his wife has recently passed, and he's pretty sure the cult had something to do with it. From there, we jump around in perspectives a little bit, we get to go back in time a little bit, we get to go to different countries because this is primarily set in Argentina, but there are characters that hang out in the UK for a while. To the point where if you're really paying attention, you can figure out which famous person one of the characters was sleeping with. And yeah, this is a fantasy horror book that was hundreds of pages long, so I'm definitely glad that I listened to it as an audiobook, which was 27 hours. On my 4-star reads, the first one being a translated book that is also very old. Actually, it might be older than Carmilla. I didn't actually check on that stat. This one is Perfume. This is all about this guy who was born in these really bad circumstances because his mother was a fishmonger, and it turns out that she just tried to give birth to him under the table at her fishmonger's place and then like leave him to die, which is something she had done 3 times previous, but he cried out, people found the baby, she actually ended up dying for killing all of these kids, although I don't know how they figured out that she had killed previous children. And he goes on from there having a very strange life, mostly strange because his sense of smell is top tier. If there's been a drop of something in the vicinity of him, and by vicinity I mean within like 10 miles, he'll be able to tell you exactly what it is. Especially after he hones his skills for 7 years by just laying in a cave, not eating, and just smelling things, or remembering smelling things. This book is really weird. It also gets to a point where this one woman smells really, really good and he wants to own that scent, and I think you can understand how he goes about doing that. And then later he goes about trying to replicate that, and that's a whole other thing. This book is really, really weird. If you've ever read it, please talk to me about it in the comments down below because, yeah, some things definitely happen in this book that I did not expect. Next we have The Message. This one is kind of disjointed in that it's kind of a travel memoir. It's kind of written to his students because he was meant to give them an essay and never ended up doing that because, as he admits, he wasn't the greatest student when he was in school, so it actually tracks that he didn't give his students the essay he promised. And this has a lot to do with him traveling to various locations, one of them being Palestine. And it's basically going over his experiences of those different locations. I read this pretty close to the beginning of the month and I do not remember all that much. This month I also read The Complete Persepolis, which is a surprise to me because I thought that last month when I read a volume of Persepolis I thought it was the entire story, but it turns out to have only been the first half. So I got this one from the library, again because I got the other one from the library, kind of flicked through the first half of it and started halfway through this, which is the point where I had left off. This is about a woman who was born and raised in Iran until she was an early teenager, and then she was actually sent to Austria. And that's about the halfway point through this graphic memoir, so we're seeing her life in Austria, what it's like to be at a boarding school there, what it was like with her living arrangements there, what ended up happening to her in that country and when she eventually returns to Iran, and how it was different and how in some ways it wasn't. I love seeing people's lives that are vastly different than my own, and this definitely fits that bill. Next we have a nonfiction book that is called Gardening Can Be Murder, and this can basically be summed up as a book talking about mystery books that happen to involve gardens or horticulture, and is basically just one big rec list for those types of books. In fact, as I was reading this, every time a book or an author was name dropped, I added it to a list, and that list is over 100 books long. This talks about different garden locations in books. This talks about different methods from gardens for murder, but mostly it's a big recommendation list and I really liked it for that. Next we have Mystery Magnet. This is about this guy named Dash, and his parents are both mystery writers. He wants to become a mystery writer, and as we meet him, he's actually about to interview to become the assistant to another woman who is a big mystery writer. Like, she helped solve a true crime case in the day, and she's written lots of best-selling mysteries, so he thinks that he can learn a lot from her. However, within less than a day, there is a murder on premises, and it seems that he is the most likely suspect, so he's going to have to solve this murder to clear his own name. This one is kind of fun and camp, and you get this found family vibe because there's a bunch of people that are basically the last picks. That's actually the name of the series. And it's basically these people that come together because nobody else really wants to associate with them, or at least that's how it seems. It's one of those books where you really don't know who to trust because you've just met all of these characters in this small town and you're just trying to figure out what happened. Next we have interesting facts about space. And if you like books that can be categorized as messy queers, this is a book for you. Our protagonist in this one is a lesbian who is deaf in one ear and she likes to date around a lot. She's had kind of a tumultuous upbringing which definitely affects her current life, in that her dad actually left her and her mom when she was like 6 and went off to have a family with other people, and she didn't actually get to meet her half-sisters until he had already died. She has this thing where she has a really hard time saying I love you to her own mother, let alone anyone else, so instead she'll send her mother interesting facts about space, which actually makes a little bit of sense because she happens to know a lot about space, because she actually works for the space agency as a librarian and doing the kind of data entry for certain projects. Oh, and she's also obsessed with true crime, which may or may not be the reason why she thinks she has a stalker. Like I said, messy queers, definitely worth a read. Next we have something to talk about, and this is an ultimate slow burn. We get two perspectives. One of them is the assistant to this woman who is very big in Hollywood. She's got her own production company, she's a director of things, she writes other things, she used to be on a sitcom when she was a kid. And then obviously the other perspective is this woman that I just described. They end up in the tabloids because the boss has never brought a date to any awards event ever, but she actually asked her assistant to come to this one very specific award ceremony because she knew there was going to be a lot of people wanting to hound her with questions about a very specific project and she didn't want to have to talk about it. But because this is the first time she literally has ever brought anyone in the 3 or 4 decades she's been in the industry, everyone's like, oh my goodness, she's dating her assistant. Which is bad because they're not dating, but which is also bad because there's kind of a mutual attraction. Like I said, this is a very, very, very slow burn, so if you like those, you will like this. Next we have Mystery in the Title, which is the second in the Miranda Abbott series by Ian Ferguson and Will Ferguson, who are brothers who write books together. They also write books apart and have completely separate careers outside of that, or at least I know Ian does because I've actually met Ian before, I've worked with him before. This book is set in the very small town of Happy Rock, and our main character is Miranda Abbott. She is a woman who used to be on a TV show 15 years ago. She was actually the lead of the TV show, and on that TV show she played this character named Pastor Fran, who is always getting into these different mysteries and solving them. So Miranda, as a person, feels like she has all this experience solving crimes, even though all of the crimes she has previously solved, bar one, were, you know, in fiction. In this volume she's trying to get cast in a movie, and obviously something happens on the set of that movie and there is a mystery to be solved. This is one of those books where the main character is insufferable but she grows on you because she's got that persona of like every time she walks into a room she's like, yes, it is I, even though like a lot of the people are like, who is this old lady? I don't know her. And you can see all these different ways where the people in her life kind of make space for her ridiculousness because she's kind of oblivious to this being the way that she is. And for the most part, she means good. She's just kind of obnoxious sometimes. This one definitely took some twists and turns, and it really took the idea of being in theater or being in productions. You have to know kind of the behind the scenes of those types of things to really understand and absolutely love the setup for this. And that's why I think Ian in particular writing a book like this makes a lot of sense, because he definitely has a theater background. I actually met him because he was directing this thing locally and I was helping out with it. If you like books set in theater, I definitely recommend this series. The first one is called I Only Read Murder, and fun fact, I read it last year in the Louvre. Our next book on the list is Amelia If Only. This is a road trip book where these friends just went to prom, one of them broke up with her girlfriend, and then our main character wants to get her mind off of that, and also her favorite YouTuber is like 5 hours away doing a meet and greet type of thing, so she figures let's all of us go to that, especially because one of the friend group was already going there anyway to meet her long-term girlfriend. This is all about feelings and people being oblivious and other people thinking people have crushes on certain people because of certain things and other things being platonic, and it's just a lot of fun. This one could also be categorized under messy queers, but it's like a very small, very wholesome messy queers. Next we have A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. This is about a 14-year-old girl who works in her aunt's bakery, and she's what they call a minor wizard because she has a magic ability, but it only pertains to dough. She can make dough rise really well, she can stop it from burning, all of those types of things, but her magic specifically has to do with dough, which makes working in a bakery a really good fit for her. One morning she comes into work really, really early and finds a corpse on the floor, and she has to be like, why is there a dead girl in the bakery? And at first the people from the castle think that she did it, so she has to go to the castle and explain, no, I just got there, she was already dead, please don't execute me, like what's going on? As this is going on, she's finding out that a lot of people with magic abilities are either disappearing or leaving the kingdom altogether, so she's got to figure out that, she's got to figure out this murder mystery, and then there's a whole bigger plot behind that, and she's going to have to use her powers to save the kingdom. I have loved everything I've read by T. Kingfisher, but this is the first of the more whimsical books, and I'm so glad that that love that I have for her horror blends into these types of books as well, because this was so much fun. There was great character work and commentary, and I will continue to read her books. On to our 4.5 star reads, the first one being Blood over Bright Haven. This one is set in a world where there is magic, but it's done in a very interesting way. In order to wield the spells that are basically keeping the city running, like literally keeping the trains running, the lights on, those types of things, people have to train for absolute years. And they actually do their spell casting kind of like computer coding, but on a typewriter that is also magical. As we meet our main character, she is about to be tested to become a mage. There are only 100 mages at a time in this city, and this is a really big deal because they only allow one woman to test once every decade because all of the mages think that women shouldn't be mages. And that is definitely not the only thing wrong with this city, because if you're not of a certain social class and race, you are looked down upon quite heavily, to the point where sometimes the character whose head we're in will be like, there are no people around here, even though there's a janitor literally right there, and that is a person. Obviously this book has a lot to do with race and class and the different things that people who are in power try to do to keep themselves in power and the way they can rewrite history, and if you can get through the fact that you're going to want to throw this book across the room because of all of the racism, which I believe is intended to make you incredibly angry, then you will enjoy this book. I don't know if that's the best word for this, but it is definitely a reading experience that I recommend. Next we have Love at Second Sight. This one is set in a world that is very much like our own, except for we know magic exists, because there's witches, there's werewolves, there's vampires, there's fairies, all of those types of things, they exist. And they kind of commingle in the society, although that's not to say that everybody is cool with everybody else, because obviously there are certain different magical factions that don't get along, and there are certain humans that are definitely prejudiced towards magic folk. Our main character is getting to go to high school with his best friend, which is very exciting because they've been at different schools up until this point, but a new school was built, so they're basically getting to go to the same location, which not only means he gets to hang out with his witch best friend, which he hasn't been able to do too much except for outside of school, especially because his parents don't like the fact that his best friend is a witch, but he also gets to go to school with a guy that he thinks is really cute. And unfortunately on his very first day, something happens to completely change the course of his life. He ends up having what the nurse explains to him is a psychic vision, and in this vision he sees somebody die. But he doesn't know when this is going to happen, where this is going to happen, besides a little bit of what he could see of the area while he was in the vision, and importantly, he doesn't even know the person that died. And, you know, he doesn't know if this was a real vision or not. From here, he's going on a quest to figure out whether or not these are real visions, whether or not his parents will just leave him alone and let him live, as well as what's up with Al, his best friend, who is kind of not having enough time for him, and whether or not the cute boy is actually interested in him or not. You know, regular high school things. Again, I've loved everything I've read by F.T. Lukens, and this is no exception to that. This was fantastic. Next we have Canto Contigo. This is about a boy who has been the head of his mariachi group at his high school for 3 years now, and as we meet him is about to be at this extravaganza, which is basically the big performance of the year for mariachi. Since he's been in the group, it's always won this, and he has always won lead vocalist, and he really wants to this year because his grandfather, the person who actually gave him his love for mariachi, is sick in hospital and not doing very well, so he wants to bring those trophies back to his grandfather. The night before the event, he meets this cute boy, things are really hitting off, and unfortunately they get interrupted and they don't see each other again. However, for his senior year, he ends up having to switch schools because the whole family has to move because his dad gets a job in a different city, and he ends up having to join the mariachi group that has been second best every single year. He's not happy about this, but obviously he's going to be the lead, right? This is one of those books where the character is going through incredibly hard times, and he is really good at what he does, so you can see why he's being cocky about it, but also you need to learn to share. But also you know why he's trying to do it, and it means so much to him, but he won't let other people in and let them know why he's being that way. This is an absolutely fantastic book. The whole time I wanted to be able to go see these performances that they were describing because they sounded beautiful. And obviously, I highly recommend you read this one. Penultimately, we have How to Sell a Haunted House. This one is about a woman who's in her 30s. She's a single mother to a little girl. She has a younger brother who she's never really gotten along with because he's always been like the favorite of the family. He can do no wrong, and that's super annoying because he's constantly doing wrong things and his parents don't seem to care. And after getting a particularly distressful call from him, she finds out that she needs to go to her family home to actually clear it out because her parents have passed. Unfortunately, her mom's biggest hobby was making these really creepy dolls. But they're also, you know, family heirlooms, so should they get rid of them? I don't know. But when her and her brother are in this house, weird things start happening. This one is such a fascinating book because obviously it takes a haunted house trope, it takes creepy dolls, those types of things, but then it does so much with those, and it actually gives really good backstories to this character that you're set up to absolutely hate because he sucks. And then you get to see what he went through and how our main character's perspective is not the only perspective. And then when you think it's going to end, it doesn't, it gets worse. I had a highly enjoyable time reading this. As for my 5-star and favorite book of the month, that was Disturbing the Dead, which is the 3rd book in the A Rip Through Time series. Obviously, being the 3rd book, I can't tell you too much about what happens, but I can tell you the setup for this series. We have this woman named Mallory. She is from Vancouver, but she's currently in Edinburgh, Scotland, because her grandmother isn't doing well. And in between hospital visits, she decides to go for a run. While she's on this run, she goes through this dark clothes, and the next time she wakes up, she's actually in the body of a maid 150 years previous to her timeline. So, you know, that's an issue. In 2019, she's actually a police officer, so she has all these investigative skills, but she can't necessarily use everything she knows because she's 150 years previous and they don't have some of the technology. But she ends up trying to use these skills to help her employer, Mr. Gray, because he's a city undertaker, so basically if murdered bodies are coming through the city, they're probably coming to his business because that's where the coroner tends to do his autopsies. But the interesting thing about that is the actual coroner is terrible at his job, and Dr. Gray is actually not technically a doctor even though he passed the exam because of some racist bullshit. And also that one time he stole a body, but it was totally for science. What I can tell you about this 3rd volume is it starts out with the characters being invited to and ultimately attending something called an unwrapping party, which unfortunately is something that literally happened in the UK during this time, where people would bring mummies from Egypt and just, you know, unwrap them because that's a fun party event. And it's not like that used to be a person or anything. And to be clear, our main character and Dr. Gray are both like, we don't really want to go to this because, like, it's not very ethical. But they know that his sisters want to go for the curiosity aspect of it. Not to mention that if he is there, he can at least oversee it and make sure as much respect as possible happens at the event. Unfortunately, this unwrapping does not go any way anybody planned, and of course, there's a mystery to solve. This book rated so highly because not only is the mystery aspect to it incredibly interesting, but then also the whole, hey, I'm stuck in the 20-year-old's body in 150 years before my time thing, that whole plot line progresses as well, and I really loved to see that, and I'm really excited to read the next book. Alright, let's go over which of these books counted for the prompts for Read Queer all year. For Bi Rep, we had something to talk about. For Deaf Main Character, we have interesting facts about space. For Book with an Adaptation, we have A Single Man, and for Latinx Heritage Month, we have Canto Contigo. As for Season-a-thon, there were 5 prompts. I picked 5 books. I only read 2 of those original books, but the other 3 books I was able to sub in for other things. For the nonfiction prompt, I was supposed to read Against Techno-Ableism. Unfortunately, that book didn't come from the library in time, so I subbed in Gardening Can't Be Murder. For Read a Book Set in the UK, I was supposed to read The Haunting of William Thorne. I didn't quite get to it, but I can sub in Disturbing the Dead. For Read a Foreign Language Book, I was supposed to read Tender as the Flesh, which I'm actually currently reading, but obviously didn't get to it in time. But for this, I can actually sub in Our Share of Night. And then for short fiction, I read what I was supposed to read, which was Mystery Magnet, and for adaptation, I read A Single Man. As for my bingo board from hell, this is what it looks like. I have 3 different stamps on it. That's very exciting, and I think I can definitely make a bingo at some point. I'm not going to cross out this board, I don't think. I just don't have enough time in the day. But I'm doing better than I thought I would be doing. If you want to hear me talk more about these books or other books for that matter, the playlist for my weekly entertainment wrap-ups is always linked down below. If you've read any of these or you now want to read any of these, please let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!